So once we complete the building of the strategic plan, and we have that strategic plan reasonably close to being finished and ready to communicate, we have to then begin the difficult task of actually implementing the strategic plan. So we're going to go through two topics here. One is making sure we know that we have some work to do to finish the strategic plan, and then secondly, to address and discuss the challenges and the importance of effectively using and implementing the strategic plan. There's some major points about making sure we wrap up all our loose ends when we've built the strategic plan. We have to finish any unfinished tasks, and that could be quite a bit, because all the pre-work that we've talked about and the two-day session, off-site session with senior leadership often result in a lot of loose ends. We may need more work on mission, vision, values, goals, and objectives. Our performance data probably was not ready at the strategic planning session. Our strategies were probably roughed in simply due to lack of time. And we probably did not even talk about sort of the implications of those strategies, like how much is it going to cost, where we're going to get the people and the money resources to implement the strategies. And we probably did not have a logic model developed as well. So there's quite a bit to do. We also may not have spent as much time, especially if you use the practices we've talked about this semester, in terms of focusing on the internal issues, which, again, some students especially like to go right for the internal issues that are most occupying their minds, like communication or morale or whatever. So you may have some work left to do on the down and in stuff, the internal stuff. The plan has to be written and it has to be vetted as well. So quite a bit of work, excuse me, may remain just to get the document actually finished and signed by the leadership. Common obstacles in getting it done: writing the plan becomes a lower priority. The senior leadership gets busy. They don't have the time or the interest to come back to it because they're very busy. There's unresolved issues, and that's likely to be the case. And that means that there's a lot of additional work necessary, and somebody's got to do it, but everybody wants to get back to their regular work and tasks, which are usually more than they can do anyway. And so we're sort of waiting for the facilitators to deal with the unfinished tasks, and if they don't do it, then the unfinished tasks may not get done. So we really have to make sure that the plan is finished, that it's written, and that it's signed, because we need a sense of completion and a sense that we've expended our energy well at the end of the day. So loose ends, as I mentioned, mission, vision, and values. We may not have spent as much time discussing those things because, as I've indicated in earlier lectures, we're really focused on the situational assessment, the goals, the objectives, which are all the outcomes, the performance measures, the strategies, and the actions. So it may be that the mission, vision, and values has to be revisited because of what we've built in the details of the plan. The goals and objectives might need to be refined. In terms of wording, we may have missed some objectives in our off-site session. In our analysis, we figure out that there's additional objectives or additional strategies or gaps in the strategy that have to be addressed. So through analysis, we come up with these things, and then we have to reconvene our team and tell them what our suggested revisions and modifications are to get their buy-in. So it doesn't take an off-site 2-day session, but it does take a 2- or 3-hour meeting to really discuss the closing of the gaps and the filling in of the loose ends. We also may find that some internal issues that were discussed at the meeting, if you did the SWOT approach, the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, the weaknesses are often internal issues, and they may not yet have been addressed effectively. And so there may need to be time spent addressing internal issues as well. And we may not have taken the strategies to enough detail at our off-site session to actually see how they're going to be implemented. And so we may need some action plan work as well. So for finishing the vision and mission, again, we recognize, what is our ultimate mission, what's our main thing, what's our business. We want to come back and make sure that we have a mission statement that encompasses everything that we do, that there wasn't scope creep, and we have an old mission statement. We want a vision statement that's aspirational and measurable, and gets everyone in the organization fired up when they see it. The goals and objectives, our goals, as we've said before, are written as end statements, but we need to make sure we've got the right objectives, all the objectives, that they cover all the key goal elements, that there's no key objectives missing. We want to ensure that they're worded appropriately and that they include a direction, a change area, and a target population. Note that if the goals and objectives are significantly different than where we ended the two-day session, we've got to get back with the leadership and have that discussion that was the case. Strategies need to be completed. There's a high probability coming out of an off-site session that the strategies were discussed in breakout groups, were reported on, but not refined enough in the two-day session to really be actionable, complete, comprehensive, etc. And so we've got to really make sure we spend time completing them. That might require reconvening the entire group for a 3-hour session. It might also mean facilitating some of the off-site participants in small group sessions and having discussions about whether these are the right strategies, whether there are enough strategies, and whether the strategies are doable or not. We also likely have to develop performance information. During the off-site session, we may identify things we want to measure, outcomes, outputs, and activities. But we may not have had the data. So if we came up with new measures at the off-site session, certainly we're going to have to come back and ask ourselves how we're going to measure this and how are we going to build the baseline, which is the current data, the current numbers, so that we can set targets for the future. So performance information often is incomplete and needs to be completed in order to write the strategic plan. And then refining the strategies. Strategies really are the critical things that make a plan successful, make an organization successful. They have to be refined, they have to be analyzed. We have to look at the obstacles, the issues, and the factors that have to be addressed. We have to look at the resource implications and the personnel and the technology and the facilities and money and budget. We have to identify what, when, where, and who's going to lead each strategy. And we also often, although we don't have to do this for the strategic plan completion, we have to develop action plans as well. Organize and initiate strategy implementation teams is a good way to do this. We have to develop a logic model. We've gone through logic models in other lectures. We need to understand that the logic model tells a story. It's a pictorial diagram, very useful for leaders, stakeholders, and others to see at the high level what the strategic plan is all about and how the pieces fit together. We also have to discuss the internal issues, the organizational structure, the management leadership, communication, morale, motivation, personnel capabilities, infrastructure, budget and resource implications, and all the internal things that evolve based on having an aggressive strategic plan. Then we have to get the plan completed by writing it. We have to designate a writer, write the sections, incorporate the final elements, incorporate graphics, get our graphics group working on making it look nice, add an executive summary, have it reviewed by the Strategic Planning Steering Committee, and then from there senior leadership, and then from there the employees and the stakeholders, etc. We have to present the plan in draft form to the staff because we don't want them to think it's a done deal. And that's generally an all-hands meeting. Some techniques I've used in the past is I've handed out an evaluation form. So as we review the strategic plan elements on overheads at the front, we ask questions of staff about each of the elements. To what extent do they agree that it's true? Do they have any additional thoughts, etc.? It's a very useful thing to do because you get staff input that might be useful in terms of pointing out something you hadn't thought about, but it also gives staff a sense that they have a chance to provide input to the strategic plan. You need to do the same thing with your key stakeholders. You may not want the stakeholders having as much input as the employees, but still you need to review this in terms of your legislative, if you're an agency, your customers, your investors, your interest groups. And you want to use feedback you receive from these different groups to amend the strategic plan within reason if it makes sense to do so. And also, you're trying to, through this process, encourage support and buy-in for strategic direction. Once you do that, you build your final plan, you communicate it, you publish it, you post it to the website, you get your strategy implementation teams busy to turn strategy into actions, and then it's time to initiate implementation activities and monitor progress. So the major points for completing the plan is to finish the unfinished tasks, to make sure you focus on the internal things as well. We don't want to forget them. You want to write the draft strategic plan and communicate it and get it signed. Then you have to implement the strategic plan, and you have to evaluate and monitor it. So we're going to proceed right into these steps because these are critical subsequent steps for strategic plan implementation. In terms of implementing the strategic plan, we need to make sure we translate the plan into annual operational plans, into incremental annual plans, because strategic plans for 3 to 5 years, but it really has to be translated into this coming year and the following year to see how things are going, because you may make adjustments down the road. We need to determine the implementation approach, who's going to implement, what are the change implications, and how we're going to deal with those change implications. And one suggestion that we've used successfully in a number of cases is to create a strategic management council, to turn that strategic plan steering group, perhaps, into a strategic management council that oversees the actual implementation of the plan. So we kind of shift the emphasis of the leadership group from focusing on building a strategic plan to getting it done. That's the implementation phase. Once it is implemented, we need to make sure we evaluate and monitor. We need to go back and look at our plan and how we built it and whether the process worked. We need to look at the implementation progress, so that Strategic Management Council needs to meet probably quarterly, ask itself, is implementation on target? We had our performance targets. How well are we doing in meeting those performance targets? And if the targets are off track, why and what's causing it? What do we need to do to fix things? We also need to ask ourselves on a regular basis, have any of the assumptions that we used in developing a strategic plan changed since we did the plan? And if so, what are we going to do about it? We need to communicate progress, and we need to also develop a issues collector, which I'll talk about in a second. So the results are about two things. If you really want to achieve results and you want to be successful, you have to know what needs to be done, which is having a strategic plan, and then you actually have to get it done. You have to do. So knowing and doing are two different things. Knowing is about doing a gap analysis, figuring out where you want the organization to be in the future, and then the implementation part is about actually putting it in place and getting that gap to be closed. So this is sort of a visual that says that. So recognize that knowing is developing the priorities and the strategies, and doing is implementing them. And we sort of talked about these things a little bit. I generally like to categorize organizations that I encounter in terms of how well they use the strategic management process. And because a lot of organizations give lip service to strategic planning, they do a strategic plan, they have it in place, but then they put it aside and they go back to doing business as usual. And so I generally like to categorize whether an organization really is effectively using the strategic approach to managing the organization. And so you can categorize organizations. Level one is an organization goes through the motion. Develops a strategic plan because it has to, it's required by good management practices, but it doesn't use it. Constructive engagement means there was some good effort put into the strategic plan, and maybe some ideas get translated into day-to-day practice, but it's sort of a casual approach and a haphazard approach. Critical mass level 3 means that there's some energy and some effort towards putting the strategic plan in place. It's sort of half-hearted, right? It's not full on. And some of the things in the strategic plan are getting done, but others are getting ignored. Some people are using the plan, and some people are not. Some elements in the organization. Sustainment means that we actually are using the strategic plan, and we're trying to do it the best we can. We have our weak spots and our gaps, but in general, we use the strategic plan to manage the organization. And level 5 is an organization that's got its act together, that is really, really strategic. And I can give you lots of good private executive examples, especially of organizations that really are at a level 5. And I think of Apple as the prime example of a very mature, strategically oriented organization. I could give you other examples of ones that are not, but we won't get into that. Don't forget the reasons why we do strategic planning. We want to determine what our priorities are over the next 3 to 5 years and communicate them. We want to make sure that we are able to meet external demands for the organization and that the organization doesn't go out of business. And we want to foster the best thinking and innovation about different ways, new ways, better ways to do what we do. Implementation is really about getting the plan put in place and getting it moving. And so that requires refining and incorporating the things in the strategic plan into our day-to-day lives, into our annual plans, into our annual budgets, into our operational plans, even into the performance appraisals of our leaders, and then have it go downstream from there. The top-down nature of planning process does provide a forum for dialogue, and it enables us to identify, discuss, and address central issues, regional issues, international issues, and obstacles in ways that senior management can really be used to bring all of the resources of the organization to bear on them. So recognizing, again, as I've said, just developing a strategic plan, it's not easy, but it's easier than implementing it. Day-to-day activities, however, come up and they cause a plan to get set aside, and so we need a solution, right? We need a strategic management committee or an executive board to oversee implementation. We need to develop performance contracts for managers and supervisors. We need to tap our best and brightest employees to serve on strategy implementation teams. We need to have periodic progress reports, and we need to link our plans and our budget process. You've seen this chart before in earlier lectures. This is a way to take data in the strategic plan and to work it all the way down into action plans. So, and by the time you get down to converting strategies into actions, you know which unit in the organization or which agency is going to be responsible for getting the strategies implemented. You're going to know about how we're going to measure progress in implementing strategies, where the new resources are required, etc. So very useful worksheet for refining and implementing the strategic plan. The first year I generally consider the jumpstart year. This is if it's a big strategic plan with a lot of change in it, the first year is going to be the hardest because you've got to shuffle people and resources and organizational units. We use the strategic plan as our roadmap. We develop the operating plans. We integrate the planning, budget, and management processes in the first year. We refine our performance measures and our performance data. We get performance contracts for the managers linked to the strategic plan in place, and then we closely manage the process and we keep it on track. I mentioned to you in the performance data lecture, performance measurement lecture, that you have set out in the strategic plan a performance targets, and now as time goes by, you start to have actual performance data, and you need to keep your eye on whether they're as planned or whether they're diverging, and if they're diverging, you need to figure out why and what to do about it. So just remember that when expected and actual performance information starts to diverge, action needs to be taken. Were the targets realistic and attainable? Why didn't our strategies work? Did we not implement it well, or was it the wrong strategy? And you need to communicate. Remember, this planning process is not punitive. It's designed to move the organization. So if something's off track, it's not that somebody did something wrong. It's that we need to get it back on track. We also need to appreciate that if the targets are not realistic, we need to adjust them. If the strategies were valid and they're not working, why are they not working? And we need to make changes and improvements. Refining the strategic planning process, we also, after we've done the strategic plan, we'd like to look back and see how it went and see if we did it well and if we need to make changes next time we develop the strategic plan. So it's very important to do a sort of a post-development look back at the strategic planning process. So strategic planning implementation, bottom line is that the planning initiative should lead to improvements, not hassles and not retributions. It's critical to create buy-in and involvement throughout the project. Even after you develop the plan, as you start to implement it, you've got to involve people and listen to them and make sure that that everyone's on board and trying their best to implement the plan, adjust the plan if it needs to be adjusted. And there's a lot of potential here for a win-win situation. And so you can see sort of the bullets here. What's critical success factors about implementing a strategic plan? There's got to be a perception that measurement is a management tool. It's not a gotcha thing. We've got to get people willing to measure outcomes. We know we only influence outcomes. We don't control them. A lot of people, especially the ones who are high control people, don't like to measure things that they don't control. So we have to overcome that kind of thinking. We have to recognize that planning and implementation are about analysis and critical thinking. We have to have senior management commitment. We have to have a management incentive system that's based on achieving these performance targets and that is results-oriented and not activities-oriented. We need to have a tight linkage between performance and budget, and we need to have ongoing review, dialogue, and adjustment. The key idea here is that we want to take a look at where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. We want to do whatever it takes to get there, and we want to monitor that we're actually doing what we said we would do. So in terms of implementing, evaluating, and monitoring a strategic plan, implementation requires translating the strategic plan into annual plans. It requires figuring out who's going to do what, when, and where, dealing with all the change issues that go with strategic planning, having a group that's responsible for making sure the plan doesn't get set aside. In terms of evaluating and monitoring, post-planning assessment to see what's been working and what hasn't, to make adjustments to the process itself, and then to monitor implementation progress. Quarterly meetings, we look at our progress in implementing it. We have groups reporting to us. We look at the performance data to make sure we're on track and on target. We ask ourselves if we need to make adjustments. If we need to make adjustments, we need to get them made. We need to get senior leadership involved, but we need to get them made. We need to communicate. We need to make sure that we have a continued buy-in and support from those who are affected by the strategic plan. And also this last issue, I didn't say too much about it. Over time, new issues come up, new things that would belong in a situational assessment. And so one of the things I always advocate is that someplace, somebody, some group or person is responsible for letting anybody in the organization toss in new issues that they're starting to see into the issues collector. And it doesn't matter whether they're external issues or internal issues. We start collecting issues, so the next time we do strategic planning process, one of the things we'll do is look in our collector to see what issues have been put in there and include them in our strategic planning discussion. So that's the key points about implementing strategic plans. It's not an easy thing to do. You have to take a very aggressive role. The organization has to be very committed to implementing a strategic plan. Also flexible enough to adapt and adjust as you go along.